I've seen a lot of things during my time as a cop. Most nights were ordinary, nothing to write home about. But once in a while, something stays with you. There is one night in particular that I can't shake. It was back in January 2005. I was on patrol with my partner Mason. We received the call late at night at 11 p.m. A woman had barricaded herself in a bathroom, screaming that her lover was trying to kill her. It sounded like just another household disturbance. But we have learned not to make assumptions. When we arrived at the house, it was one of those places that already felt off. Old house, end of the street, no lights on inside. As soon as we stepped out of the car, I remember thinking, this is going to be different. Mason knocked on the door, loud enough to shake the frame. No answer. He knocked again. Still nothing. We exchanged glances, and with a quick nod, Mason kicked the door in. The place smelled like it hadn't been lived in for a while. Dusty, cold, empty. We cleared the first floor, no signs of anyone. But then from upstairs, we heard it. A woman crying, quiet, like she didn't want to be heard. I looked at Mason, and I could see in his eyes that same unease I was feeling. We weren't rookies. We'd handled worse situations than this, but something about this one, it felt wrong. We made our way upstairs. The crying got louder as we approached one of the doors. It was locked. "Ma'am, this is Officer Bradley. You're safe now. We're here to help," I called out. The crying stopped. Just like that. Dead silence. Then, in a shaky voice, she whispered, "He's still here." I glanced at Mason. We'd checked the whole house. There was no one else here. "Ma'am, we've secured the house. There's no one here but us," I said. Then downstairs, the front door slammed shut with a loud bang. Mason's head snapped toward the stairs, his face tense. "It's just the wind," he muttered, though he didn't seem convinced. And then, from behind the locked door, the woman's voice, calm this time, asked, "Are you sure, Officer Bradley?" That stopped me in my tracks. I hadn't told her my name. Neither had Mason. I could feel my pulse picking up. "Ma'am, you need to step away from the door. We're coming in," Mason said, his voice a little too eager to kick that door down. But I held up a hand, stopping him. Something was off. Way off. Before I could say anything else, the woman's voice changed. Darker. Colder. "If you open this door, Mason, I'll make sure to visit your family next time you're alone." Mason went pale. I could see the fear take over him. I didn't even know what to say. We weren't dealing with something normal anymore, and deep down, I think we both knew it. Mason kicked the door in, hard. We burst into the room, ready for anything, but the room was empty. Completely empty. No window, no second door, just a bathroom, as ordinary as they come. We stood there, frozen, trying to make sense of what just happened. There was no way someone could have been in that room, but we both heard her. We both talked to her. Neither of us said much after that. We did a final sweep of the house. Nothing. We got out of there fast. I drove us back to the station in silence. Mason stared straight ahead the whole way, his hands trembling. He wasn't the nervous type, but that night rattled him. Rattled both of us. As we pulled away from the house, I made the mistake of looking back. That's when I saw it, a dark shape, crouched by the side of the house. At first, I thought it was just a shadow, but then, slowly, it began to rise. Taller and taller, until its head was level with the roof of that two-story house. I blinked, and it was gone. We didn't talk much after that. What do you even say in a situation like that? Mason and I drove back to the station, each of us lost in our own thoughts. He was gripping the dashboard like the damn thing was going to fly out of the car, and I couldn't shake what I'd seen or thought I'd seen. But we were cops, and you don't get to let your imagination run wild. You focus on what's in front of you. You rationalize things. But that night, there was no logic that could explain what happened. When we got back, the usual buzz of the station was a weird comfort. People moving around, phones ringing. It all felt like normal life again. I parked the car, and Mason just sat there, staring at his hands. I didn't push him. We were both rattled. We grabbed our things, signed off for the night, and didn't say a word about the house. Some things don't need to be said out loud. I went home, thinking a few hours of sleep would do the trick. But when I lay down, my mind wouldn't shut off. I kept replaying that moment, the figure rising behind the house, taller than it had any right to be. I told myself it was a trick of the light, that I was tired, that my eyes had played a game on me. That's what you do. You find excuses. But deep down, I wasn't buying it. The next day, I decided to look into the house. Just curiosity, right? Nothing formal, just asking around. I learned that it had been empty for months. No one had lived there for a long time. The last owner, a woman single, had disappeared. No body was found, but her family had declared her dead after a while. No one could explain it. People said she just vanished one night. No signs of a struggle, nothing. That's when it hit me. The woman in the bathroom, her voice, it was calm, too calm for someone who thought they were about to die. Like she wasn't afraid at all, like she knew exactly what was going to happen. I tried to shake it off, but the more I thought about it, the stranger it seemed. There's a look people get when they're scared for their life. I've seen it plenty of times, but this was something else. Mason and I never really talked about it again. Every now and then, I'd catch him looking at me, like he wanted to bring it up but didn't know how. I can't blame him. What were we supposed to say? Hey, remember that time we broke into an empty house and talked to a ghost? It sounds ridiculous, but that's the thing. You know what you saw, and it doesn't matter if anyone believes you. A few months later, I was on a different case. Routine stuff, nothing exciting. But something about that night wouldn't let go. I started driving past the house on my own time. Not every day, but often enough. I wasn't sure what I was expecting to see. Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. But the house never looked any different. Always quiet. Always still. One night, I stopped. I got out of the car and just stood there looking at it. I don't know why. Maybe I was hoping to put the whole thing to rest. To prove to myself it was all in my head. I walked up to the front gate, the one where I'd seen that figure rise behind. I stared at the spot for what felt like forever, trying to force myself to remember it wrong. But no matter how long I stood there, the image wouldn't change. I didn't go inside. I couldn't. Something in me just said no. I turned around, got back in my car, and drove off. I haven't been back since. But the thing is, it didn't end there. A few weeks after that night, strange things started happening. Small at first. Little things I could brush off. I'd leave my keys on the kitchen counter, come back, and they'd be on the table. I chalked it up to being distracted. Then, one night, I heard footsteps in my hallway. It was around 2 a.m., and I was the only one home. At first, I thought I was dreaming. You know how sometimes you wake up and you're not really sure if you heard something or if your brain's playing tricks? That's what I told myself. But then it kept happening, every night around the same time, like clockwork. Just the sound of slow, deliberate steps. I never saw anything, but I could feel it. The tension, like someone was there, watching. It got to the point where I'd just lie in bed, waiting for it. It's funny how fast your mind starts filling in the gaps. You convince yourself that it's nothing, but that nagging doubt, what if it's not? One night, it got worse. I was in the kitchen, making a late snack, and I heard a knock at the front door. Just one. I froze. It was nearly midnight, and no one in their right mind knocks on a door that late unless it's an emergency. But when I opened it, no one was there. Just the empty street, quiet as ever. I closed the door, figuring it was some kid playing a prank. As soon as I locked it, the knocking came again, this time from inside the house. I didn't move. I stood there, staring at the door, trying to process what was happening. There's no reason to hear knocking from the other side of a door you've just locked. No reason at all. I didn't say anything. I just turned around, walked straight back to my bedroom, and shut the door. Didn't sleep that night. Didn't sleep much after that, to be honest. Mason and I eventually crossed paths again. It wasn't planned. Just ran into each other at the grocery store. He looked like hell. Dark circles under his eyes, unshaven, a nervous energy about him. I could tell he wasn't sleeping either. We made small talk, avoided the subject we both wanted to bring up. But just as I was about to leave, he grabbed my arm. "You ever hear anything?" "After that night?" he asked, his voice low. I didn't know what to say. I wasn't about to tell him I was hearing footsteps and knocks in my own damn house. But the look in his eyes told me he was dealing with the same thing. "Yeah," I said finally. "Yeah, I do." He just nodded. No follow-up questions, no explanations. We both knew. Whatever we'd encountered that night hadn't stayed in that house. It had followed us. I tried to carry on like normal, focus on work, pretend everything was fine. But every night, without fail, those footsteps came. Some nights they were closer, like whoever or whatever it was just outside my bedroom door. Other nights, they were faint, barely noticeable, but they were always there, always waiting. I even tried staying at a friend's house once, thinking maybe it was something about my place. But it didn't matter. I heard them there too. No one else did though, just me. That's when I knew this wasn't going to stop. I wasn't the kind of guy to believe in anything supernatural. I mean, after 20 years on the force, you learn to put your faith in facts. But this wasn't something I could explain away. Every night, the same sounds, footsteps, knocking, and that feeling, that presence, like something was always just out of sight. I tried telling myself it was stress. Maybe the job was finally getting to me. But no matter how much I tried to convince myself, deep down, I knew that wasn't it. One night I finally decided to confront it. I don't know what came over me, but I was tired of feeling like a prisoner in my own home. It was around 2 a.m. again, and the footsteps had started, just like they always did. Slow, heavy, and moving down the hall toward my bedroom. I got up, grabbed my gun, because that's what you do when you've been a cop as long as I have, and I swung open the door. Nothing. The hallway was empty, but the air felt thick. I stood there for a minute, waiting, listening, but the footsteps had stopped. I wasn't sure if I should feel relieved or more on edge. My hand tightened on the grip of the gun, even though I knew it was useless. Whatever this was, it wasn't something you could shoot. That's when I heard it. A voice, soft, almost like a whisper, but clear as day. Bradley. It said my name, plain and simple. I can't describe the chill that ran through me. It wasn't the sound of someone calling you from down the hall. No, this was closer, like it was right behind me. I spun around, gun raised, heart racing. But again, nothing. I stood there, heart pounding, breathing heavy. And then, for the first time, I spoke back. "What do you want?" My voice was steadier than I felt, but I had to know. Whatever this was, it had been haunting me for weeks, maybe longer. There was no answer, just that feeling, like someone was there, watching, waiting. The next day, I went back to that house. I didn't tell anyone. Hell, I didn't even tell Mason. I just needed to see it again, to understand what had happened that night. It was broad daylight, but the house still had that same heavy feeling hanging over it. The windows were dark, the yard overgrown, like no one had touched the place since the night we were called there. I walked up to the front door, the same door Mason had kicked in. It had been boarded up, like someone wanted to make sure nothing and no one got in or out. I stood there for a long time, staring at that door, trying to decide if I had the guts to go inside. But I didn't. Something about it felt final, like once I crossed that threshold, there was no coming back. As I turned to leave, I saw something in the window. A shadow moving behind the curtains. I froze. It wasn't the kind of shadow that could be explained away by a tree or passing car. No, this was different. It was tall, like a person, but I couldn't make out any details, just the shape. And then, just as quickly as it appeared, it was gone. I didn't go back after that. Some things, you're better off leaving alone. But that voice, the footsteps, they didn't stop. If anything, they got worse, louder, closer, and the more I tried to ignore them, the more persistent they became. I tried to keep living my life like everything was normal, but the truth is that house never left me. No matter where I was, that shadow, that voice, seemed to follow. I'd be sitting at my kitchen table, the TV on in the background, and suddenly I'd hear my name. Not loud, just a whisper. Enough to make me stop what I was doing and listen. But there was never anyone there. It became part of my routine, almost like background noise. You get used to it in a way. Which is insane. I know, but it happens. One evening, I got a call from Mason. It was late, maybe 11 p.m. He sounded different, shaken. He wasn't the type to reach out unless something was really bothering him. "Bradley," he said, his voice tight. "I need to see you. It's important." I could hear something in the background, a kind of scraping sound, like someone dragging something heavy across the floor. "Mason, where are you?" I asked, feeling that familiar unease creep back in. "I'm at the house," he replied. "The house." I didn't need to ask which one. "What the hell are you doing there?" I snapped, grabbing my jacket. There was a pause on the other end, and then, in a voice that didn't sound like Mason's, he said, "She's here." I didn't waste any time. I drove to the house as fast as I could. The The street was just as empty as it had been that first night. The same flickering streetlight, the same cold air that made your skin feel tight. But this time, the front door was wide open, like it had been waiting for me. I stepped inside, calling out for Mason. No answer. The house was darker than I remembered, the air thicker. I moved through the rooms, my heart pounding, every step slower than the last. Then I heard it, a voice from upstairs. "Bradley," it said, in that same cold, detached tone I'd heard before. I followed the voice up the stairs, each step heavier than the last. When I reached the landing, the door to the bathroom was open. The same bathroom where we'd heard the woman that night. Only now, Mason was standing in the doorway, staring into the empty room. He didn't turn around when I called his name, just kept looking forward, like he was frozen. I walked up to him, put a hand on his shoulder, and that's when he finally turned. His face was pale, and his eyes were empty, hollow, like he wasn't really there anymore. "Mason?" I whispered, trying to get him to snap out of it, but he just kept staring, like he was looking through me. Then, in a voice that wasn't his, he said, "She wants you." I stepped back, my mind racing. This wasn't Mason, or at least, it wasn't the Mason I knew. He started to laugh, a low, hollow sound that made my skin crawl. "She's been waiting for you, Bradley," he said, his voice distorted. "All this time, she's been waiting." Before I could react, he stepped into the bathroom and slammed the door behind him. I froze, my pulse hammering in my ears. I ran to the door, banging on it, yelling for him, but there was no response. The room was dead silent. I kicked the door in, just like Mason had that night, but when I stepped inside, the room was empty. No Mason. No sound, nothing. I searched the entire house, every corner, every room, but he was gone, vanished, just like the woman had years ago. I stood there, in the middle of that empty house, and I finally understood. Whatever was in that house, it wasn't just a ghost or a spirit. It was something darker, something that had taken Mason. And now, it wanted me too. I left that night and never looked back. But I know it's not over, because every now and then, when I'm alone, I still hear it. The voice. And I know one day it'll come for me too, just like it did for Mason. I was driving back to the station, just another routine shift. It was late, almost dark, but not quite. The kind of evening where you can still see the road, but the streetlights are already on. I wasn't expecting much to happen. Just wanted to get home, maybe catch a game, grab a beer. That's when I saw her. She was standing right in the middle of the road, no car around, no houses nearby, just her. At first, I thought maybe she was lost or had a breakdown, something like that. I pulled over, rolled down the window, and called out, "Hey, you all right?" Nothing. No movement, no reaction. It was like she didn't even hear me. I got out, walked closer. She was young, maybe early 20s, wearing a simple dress that looked out of place for this kind of weather. But what really got me was her face. Blank, completely blank, like she wasn't there at all. I've seen people high, I've seen people drunk out of their minds, but this was different. There wasn't that glaze in her eyes, just emptiness. I waved my hand in front of her face, trying to get her attention. "You need to get off the road. It's dangerous standing here." She didn't even blink. Then, out of nowhere, she started spinning, slowly, like a kid playing in the yard. At first I thought maybe she was messing with me, or it was some kind of prank. People do weird stuff for attention these days, especially with all those videos online. But she kept spinning, faster and faster, until she lost her balance and crashed right into the side of my car. That's when things got weird. She hit her head pretty hard, but she didn't cry out or react. Nothing. Just looked up, straight at the sky, eyes wide open. I bent down, trying to help her up, but she was staring right into the sun. I mean, directly into it, like she was trying to burn out her own eyes. It was a clear day, and that sun was brutal. I quickly grabbed my notebook from the car, held it above her face to block the light. "Hey, you gotta stop doing that," I said, trying to sound calm, but something about the whole thing felt wrong. People don't just stand in the road and spin like that. They don't stare into the sun until their eyes water. I called for an ambulance. Figured she needed more help than I could give her out here. When the paramedics arrived, she still hadn't spoken. Not one word. I tried to explain what happened, but even as I was talking, I wasn't sure how to describe it. She seemed fine physically. No signs of a concussion, no injuries except for the bump on her head. But mentally, it was like she wasn't there. We got her to the hospital, but when they tried to get her to walk, she just couldn't or wouldn't. It was like her legs forgot how to move. So we put her in a wheelchair, and that's when she froze. Arms out, stiff, like she was stuck in some kind of pose. You ever see a mannequin in a store window? That's what she looked like. At first, I thought she was faking it, maybe some kind of attention-seeking behavior. But the longer I stood there, the more uncomfortable I got. I've seen a lot of things on the job, but this was new. She wasn't reacting to anything. No pain, no discomfort, nothing. The doctors ran some tests. Everything came back normal. Physically, she was fine, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something else was going on, something I couldn't explain. I left the hospital that night thinking about her. I mean, what kind of person just freezes like that? What kind of situation was I dealing with? I didn't go back to the hospital right away. Part of me figured I'd let the doctors do their job, and it wasn't really my place to stick around. But something about that girl kept bothering me. I couldn't stop thinking about how she just froze up like that, arms out, stiff. It didn't feel like anything I'd seen before. And believe me, I've seen some weird stuff in this job. A few days passed, and I found myself driving by the hospital again. I wasn't planning to check on her, but there I was, parked in front of the place, engine still running. I turned it off, sat there for a minute, and finally got out. Maybe I just needed to hear from the staff that she was getting better, or maybe I was hoping for some kind of explanation that made sense. Inside, I went up to the desk and asked about her. The nurse gave me a look, one of those raised eyebrow, tired of this kind of question looks. "She's still here," she said. "Hasn't moved since you brought her in." That threw me off a bit. How could she still be frozen? People don't just stay like that for days. I asked to see her. When I walked into her room, it was exactly as they said. She was still in that same position, arms stretched out, head slightly tilted, like she was frozen mid-thought. The machines around her beeped quietly, showing her vitals were normal, but she didn't look normal. Not at all. I sat down in the chair next to her bed, just staring at her for a while. What the hell was going on? I've dealt with people faking it before, trying to get out of a ticket, pretending to be sick. But this wasn't some act. No one could fake something like this for so long without breaking. "Why won't you say anything?" I muttered under my breath. I didn't expect her to answer, but talking out loud made it feel a little less eerie in there. I rubbed my eyes, feeling the weight of it all. She wasn't just some random case anymore. Now I was invested. I had to know what was happening to her. The doctors didn't have answers. They told me they were running more tests, but nothing seemed physically wrong with her. Mentally, they were stumped too. It was like her body just gave up. I didn't believe in that kind of thing. People don't just stop functioning out of nowhere. There's always a reason. I stood up to leave, but before I did, something caught my eye. Her fingers, just barely, twitched. It was subtle, almost too small to notice, but I was sure of it. I froze, staring at her hands. Was she waking up? Was she finally going to snap out of it? But she didn't move again. Not even a flinch. I waited a few more minutes, hoping for something, anything, but nothing happened. I left the room feeling more unsettled than ever. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, blank and empty, with those arms stuck in that unnatural position, and that twitch. What was that? Was she trying to tell me something, or was my mind playing tricks on me? The next morning, I called the hospital again. I didn't want to admit I was obsessed, but I needed to know if there had been any changes. The nurse on the other end of the line told me something strange. One of the night staff had seen her move. They swore they saw her walking down the hallway in the middle of the night, but when they approached, she was back in bed, frozen again. Now, I've heard plenty of wild stories in my time. People see things they want to see, especially in the middle of the night when their mind's playing tricks. But this, it didn't feel like that. I couldn't stop thinking about what the nurse said. Seeing her move, that didn't sit right with me. It's one thing for her to freeze up like that, but the idea that she could walk around at night and then freeze again? That felt like something out of a bad dream. I wanted to dismiss it, but I couldn't. Too many things about this didn't add up. I headed back to the hospital the next day. I wasn't even sure what I was expecting to find, but I needed to see for myself. As soon as I walked in, the same nurse from before recognized me. She gave me a knowing look and asked, "You still checking on her?" I nodded. I was becoming that guy, the one who couldn't let it go. When I got to her room, everything seemed normal at first. Same machines beeping, same frozen posture. I stood there, watching her for what felt like forever. Her arms were still locked in that strange position, head tilted slightly, but her eyes, they looked different. I can't explain it. They weren't as blank as before. It's like there was something just under the surface, like she was aware of me being there, but couldn't show it. I leaned in a little closer, almost talking to her like she could hear me. "I know you moved last night," I said quietly, feeling ridiculous even saying it. "Why are you doing this?" Nothing. No reaction. I was about to turn and leave when I caught the tiniest flicker in her eyes. A twitch, like the muscles were trying to do something, but her body wouldn't respond. My heart started pounding. I wasn't sure if I imagined it, but I couldn't ignore what I saw. Something was happening with her, and it was real. I pulled up a chair and sat next to her, trying to piece together everything in my head. Maybe it was some kind of extreme catatonia, but the thing about her eyes, that felt too deliberate. My mind kept drifting back to that night when she first started spinning. Something about that moment felt like a shift, like I had stepped into a situation I wasn't prepared for. The nurses came in to do their rounds. They acted like everything was business as usual, but I could tell they were on edge around her. One of them, a young guy with a nervous laugh, said to me, "We've been keeping an eye on her, especially at night, just in case." He didn't elaborate, but the way he said it made my stomach tighten. Just in case what? I didn't stay long after that. I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't going to get any answers by sitting there. But as I was leaving, I stopped outside her door and looked back at her one last time. Her head, it was turned, just slightly. It was facing the window now. I hadn't seen her move, but she was definitely looking out the window. I walked out of the hospital faster than I meant to, my mind racing. I've dealt with people in bad states before, mental breakdowns, trauma, the works, but this wasn't the same. There was something else going on here, something that didn't fit into any box I knew. And the fact that I was the one who found her, it felt like I was tied to this now, like it wasn't over yet. I didn't sleep much that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her, staring, watching, waiting. When the phone rang the next morning, I jumped. It was the hospital. The nurse sounded shaky. "You're going to want to come down here," she said. "Something happened last night." I got to the hospital faster than I thought possible. My mind was racing the entire drive, trying to piece together what could have happened. I replayed the nurse's voice in my head, shaky, almost scared. That didn't sit right with me. Nurses see it all. It takes a lot to shake them. I parked and hurried inside, not even sure what I was expecting to find. When I reached her room, it was chaos. Nurses were huddled near the door, whispering. A couple of doctors looked as confused as I felt. One of them spotted me and walked over, his face tight with concern. "She's gone," he said, keeping his voice low like he didn't want to cause a scene. "We don't know how, but she's not here." I stared at him, trying to process that. "What do you mean she's gone? Did she get up and walk out?" It sounded ridiculous even as I said it, but that's the only explanation I had. People don't just vanish. He nodded, but I could tell he didn't believe it either. That's the thing. No one saw her leave. She was in bed when the night shift started, and then during rounds, she wasn't. His words hung in the air like an unfinished sentence. Something wasn't being said. I walked past him into the room. It was exactly the same as before, same machines, same sterile smell, but the bed was empty. Sheets perfectly pulled back, like she had just slipped out for a moment, but no one saw her. Not the cameras, not the nurses. No alarms went off, nothing. It was like she just disappeared. I turned back to the doctor. "You're telling me no one noticed anything? A woman who's been frozen for days just walks out and no one notices?" My voice was louder than I intended. I didn't care. He shifted, uncomfortable. "We've checked the security footage. It's not helpful." "Not helpful how?" He hesitated, then led me down the hall to the security office. The footage played on a small screen. At first, it showed exactly what I expected: nurses walking in and out of rooms, patients asleep, the usual. But when it cut to her room, the screen flickered. Her bed was empty, and there was a glitch, a second or two of static. When it cleared, her room was the same, empty. I leaned in closer, staring at the screen. There's gotta be more than that. Rewind it. The security guy rewound the tape and we watched it again. Same thing. 1 second she's in the bed, the next, static. No signs of struggle, no signs of anything, really. It didn't make sense. People don't just vanish without a trace, especially not in a hospital under constant surveillance. I stood there, staring at the screen, trying to find some logical explanation. But every theory I came up with just sounded crazier than the last. The doctor was right. It wasn't helpful. There were no answers here. Walking back to the room, I felt the weight of it all pressing down. Something about this was wrong on a level I couldn't explain. It wasn't just a missing patient. It was like reality itself was playing tricks on us. I've seen a lot of strange things in my time, but this was different. It was like she wasn't supposed to be here in the first place, like she had slipped into this world by mistake. I stood there in the doorway of her room, staring at the empty bed, my mind spinning. Where had she gone? And more importantly, how? There had to be more to this, something we were missing. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were missing something, something big. I stood there in her empty room, staring at the bed, trying to piece it all together. I kept coming back to the same question. How? How does someone just disappear without a trace? It didn't add up. Not in a hospital, not with cameras everywhere. As I walked out, the nurse from earlier caught my arm. She looked pale, like she hadn't slept in days. "I didn't tell you everything," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. I felt a cold prickle run up my neck. "What do you mean?" "She wasn't the first," she said, glancing around like someone might overhear. "There was another patient about 6 months ago. Same thing. Froze up, stopped responding, and then gone." I stared at her, waiting for more, but that was all she gave me. I didn't know what to say. This was starting to feel bigger than just one strange case. I needed answers. "Why didn't you report this?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. She just shook her head. "We did, but nothing ever came of it. They wrote it off as an accident." An accident. Right. My gut told me there was more, something they didn't want getting out. I left the hospital feeling like I was chasing ghosts. But this wasn't some old wives' tale or urban legend. This was real. These were real people, vanishing right in front of us, and no one was doing a damn thing about it. That night, I couldn't sit still. My mind kept circling back to the girl. The way she looked when I first found her, spinning in the middle of the road like she didn't belong in this world. And that twitch I saw in her eyes at the hospital. It was subtle, almost like she was aware, but not in control, like something was using her. I sat up late, scrolling through reports, old case files. I found nothing about the other missing patient. No police report, no follow-up. It was like they'd scrubbed it from the system. But I did find something else, a pattern buried deep in hospital records. Over the past year, there had been several cases of patients suddenly freezing up, becoming unresponsive for days, and then vanishing. Always at night, always with no witnesses. I closed my laptop, feeling the weight of it all. I didn't want to believe it, but there it was. This wasn't just some isolated incident. Something was happening to these people, something beyond what I could explain. And I had a sinking feeling it wasn't over. The next morning, I got a call from the hospital. My heart raced, expecting more bad news, but this time, it was worse than I could have imagined. "She's back," the nurse said, "but something's wrong. You need to see this." I drove over, not sure what to expect. When I got to her room, I stopped cold. She was sitting up in bed, eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling. Her arms were down, no longer frozen in that strange pose, but something about her was off. Very off. Her skin was pale, almost translucent, like she hadn't seen sunlight in months. And her eyes, they weren't the same eyes I remembered. The nurse whispered to me, "She doesn't respond. She's awake, but it's like she's empty." I stepped closer, trying to make sense of it. "Miss, can you hear me?" I asked, my voice low, almost hesitant. Her head snapped toward me, but her eyes, there was nothing there. No recognition, no fear, just emptiness. Then, in a voice that didn't belong to her, she spoke. It's not her anymore. The shift was quiet. Just another evening, 15 to 23, sitting behind the desk at the station. Most people think being a cop is all action, but honestly, there are hours of routine, paperwork, calls that don't go anywhere. But then, out of nowhere, the fire alarm from an old address popped up on the monitor. That system? It's ancient, wired into a few homes decades ago. Most places switch to modern alarms, but there are still a handful stuck on this relic of a system. I glanced at the clock, ready for the dispatcher to take over, but she was already tied up with another call. So, I figured I'd handle it myself. I was getting up to leave when the 911 line lit up. Same address. I picked up the receiver, but there was no voice. Just dead air. Usually that's a sign someone's in trouble and couldn't talk. Maybe they passed out or were too weak to respond. I didn't wait to think it through. I grabbed my jacket and headed for the back door, radioing the call over to the fire department. You could feel the urgency. Something was off. I drove fast, lights on, siren off. No need to scare the neighborhood. As I pulled up to the house, I noticed it was calm, too calm. No smoke, no sign of anything out of the ordinary. That's when I saw them. An older woman, maybe in her late 60s, pushing a wheelchair with an even older woman seated in it. They were coming down the street, almost like they were out for a casual evening stroll. I stepped out of the car and they stopped. The daughter, I assumed, looked at me confused. "Ma'am, is this your house?" I asked, pointing behind me. "Yes, officer." "Why?" Her tone was curious, not alarmed. "I got a call. The fire alarm went off, and then a 911 call came in from this address." The older woman in the chair frowned. "We don't have a fire alarm. Had it removed years ago when we renovated. And no one's home, just us." Her words didn't sit right with me. Something was wrong. I motioned for them to follow as I headed to the back of the house. It felt instinctual, like I knew exactly where to go. Sure enough, when I reached the kitchen door, the smell of gas hit me. Faint but unmistakable. I stopped, gave them a quick glance, and then went inside. The gas was coming from a cracked pipe behind the oven. "I moved it earlier," the daughter explained. "Spilled some coffee, and I had to clean behind it. Must have pushed it back too hard." We shut off the gas and opened the windows, letting the place air out. The whole thing felt like a close call. Too close. The fire department arrived not long after. The fire chief walked straight up to the two women, arms wide. He hugged them like they were family. Tears in his eyes, almost. "You remember my father, don't you?" The older woman in the chair looked up at him, her voice soft but steady. "He was chief here 60 years ago," the current chief said, barely able to hold back the emotion. "Your husband and mine, they were good men." As I watched them talk, something clicked in the back of my mind. The alarm had been disconnected. No one else was inside the house. So who called 911? I hadn't pieced it together yet, but I could feel that something didn't add up. I couldn't shake the thought, but the longer I stood there, the less sense it made. Still, I didn't say anything. Some things just don't have an easy explanation. After everything settled, I couldn't shake that call. The 911 hang-up didn't match anything we just walked into. No fire alarm, no immediate danger, and yet someone had called for help. I headed back to the station, replaying the events in my head. The gas leak was real, no question. But why would someone make a call if the house was empty? I sat down at my desk, staring at the phone logs. The call came from the exact address, timed right with the alarm. It wasn't a glitch. Those old systems don't do that. I thought about asking dispatch to dig into the records, maybe pull a trace on the call. But something stopped me. I had this gut feeling, like when you walk into a room and feel someone's watching, but you can't prove it. Later that night, I looked up the house's history. It had been in that family for generations. The father, a retired firefighter, had lived there until his death a few years back. His wife, the woman in the wheelchair, had a stroke shortly after. That's why her daughter moved in, to take care of her. It all seemed normal, but normal doesn't explain a phantom call. I decided to drop by the next day. Just a follow-up, I told myself. When I knocked on the door, the daughter answered, looking more rested than the night before. She welcomed me inside, offering me coffee, and we sat at the kitchen table. I mentioned the 911 call. "Do you know if anyone else had access to the house?" I asked. "Maybe someone playing a prank?" She shook her head, eyes narrowing. "No one else has keys, just me and my mom, and she hasn't been able to use a phone in years." Her voice wavered, like she knew something but didn't want to admit it. That's when her mother rolled into the room, wheeled by the daughter. The old woman looked at me with tired eyes, like she'd seen too much and had given up trying to explain any of it. She didn't speak, just stared. It was unsettling. "You mentioned your father was a firefighter," I said, trying to ease the tension. "He was," the daughter replied, nodding slowly. "This house was his pride. He always made sure we were safe, even after he retired." I glanced over at the fire alarm. It was still disconnected. I stood up, thanking them for their time, but something in the back of my mind kept nagging at me. "Before I go, one last thing," I said, turning back to the older woman. "Did your husband ever mention anything about the alarm system? Maybe something he left behind?" For the first time, the old woman spoke. Her voice was frail but clear. "He said he'd always protect us, even after he was gone." I nodded, not sure what to say to that. It felt like the end of the conversation, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing something important. As I walked out to my car, I took one last look at the house. It stood there, quiet and ordinary. But nothing about it felt ordinary anymore. That night, back at the station, I couldn't sleep. I sat at my desk, staring at the call log again. The time, the address, the hang-up. It was all too perfect, too calculated. I started wondering if maybe, just maybe, that old man had somehow kept his promise. It sounds crazy, I know. But when you've been in this job long enough, you start to realize there are things out there that defy logic. I didn't bring it up with anyone else. What could I say? That a dead man had called 911 to save his family? No one would believe it. But I couldn't deny the facts. That call saved their lives. I kept thinking about that call. The idea of it haunted me more than any ghost story I'd ever heard. The next morning, I found myself back at the house. I didn't really have a reason to go, not officially anyway. The family didn't call. There wasn't a new emergency, but something kept pulling me there. Maybe it was unfinished business, or maybe it was just curiosity. Either way, I stood in front of that door again. When the daughter answered, she looked surprised. "Is everything okay?" she asked, glancing over her shoulder like she expected someone else to be standing there. "Just checking in," I said, trying to sound casual. "Wanted to see if you and your mom were doing all right after the scare." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "We're fine. Mom's still a bit shaken, but that's to be expected, right?" I nodded, but inside I felt that same nagging doubt. "Mind if I take another look at the alarm system? Just to be sure everything's working properly." She hesitated, but eventually led me to the hallway where the old fire alarm panel sat on the wall. It hadn't been replaced in years, and I could tell it was one of those older models that needed manual resets. As I fiddled with it, I asked, "You ever hear anything unusual in the house? I mean, besides what happened the other night?" The room went quiet. She didn't answer right away, and I could see her fingers fidgeting with her shirt sleeve. "What do you mean by unusual?" she finally asked. "Like sounds, maybe footsteps or voices." "Anything out of the ordinary," I said, trying to keep my tone light, but there was a weight behind my words. I could tell she knew exactly what I meant. She swallowed hard, then nodded. "I hear him sometimes," she whispered, her eyes flicking toward the ceiling. "My dad. After he died, I started hearing his voice, just little things. He used to whistle when he was working on the house, and sometimes I hear that at night." I didn't know what to say to that. I've dealt with grieving families before, people holding on to memories, but this felt different. The way she said it, it wasn't just about loss, it was about something more. Something she couldn't explain but couldn't ignore. "Does your mom hear it too?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. She shook her head. "No, but she talks about him like he's still here, like she's waiting for him to come back." Her voice cracked a little, and she quickly wiped her eyes. "I know it sounds crazy." "No, it doesn't," I said, more to convince myself than her. I glanced at the fire alarm again, making sure everything was in order, but my mind wasn't on it anymore. Something about this place, about that call, didn't sit right with me. I finished up, thanked her for letting me check things over, and headed back to my car. As I pulled out of the driveway, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't leaving that house behind. Not really. I could still see the look in her eyes, the fear she was trying to hide. And the old woman, there was something about the way she stared at me, like she knew more than she let on. That night, back at the station, I started looking into the house's history again. I didn't find anything out of the ordinary. No tragic accidents, no reports of hauntings, just a regular family that had lived there for years. But then I found something. A report from a few years back. A small house fire in the living room. It wasn't serious, just some smoke damage, but it had been started by a faulty electrical outlet. And the person who put it out? The retired firefighter who used to live there. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the report. That was it. A small detail, something no one else would think twice about. But it meant something. That report nagged at me. A small fire might not seem significant, but it was a piece of the puzzle. I grabbed my keys and headed back to the house. It was late, and the sun had disappeared, leaving only a sliver of moonlight. I parked out front, staring at the windows that looked dark and unwelcoming. Part of me wondered if I should just let it go, but the other part, my instincts as a detective, demanded I dig deeper. The daughter answered again, this time with a frown. "Why are you back?" she asked, crossing her arms defensively. I could sense her worry, mixed with something else. Fear, maybe? It made me hesitate, but I needed to know. "I found some information about the house," I said, forcing a casual tone. I thought it might help. I stepped inside, feeling a bit like an intruder. The air inside was cooler than outside, almost unsettling. It made my skin prickle. "Help with what?" she asked, her brow furrowing. I hesitated, considering my words carefully. "I came across a report about a fire a while back. I thought it could relate to your mom's experience." As I spoke, her expression shifted, a mix of surprise and dread washing over her face. "You're not saying," she started, but I cut her off. No, I'm not implying anything dangerous. Just something that might explain the noises you mentioned." I could feel the tension in the room growing thicker, and I realized how fragile the atmosphere had become. "Mom doesn't talk about it," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "She just says she feels him around." The weight of her words settled heavily. I wanted to ask more, but something told me this was a sensitive topic. "Sometimes people leave behind a presence, especially after a tragedy," I said, hoping to reassure her. "Maybe your mom's mind is just holding on to those memories." But deep down, I wasn't sure if that was true. This felt deeper, like the house itself was part of the story. "Can you promise me something?" she suddenly asked, her eyes wide. "If you find something, if you hear something, will you tell me? I don't want to be scared in my own home." Her vulnerability struck a chord. It reminded me of how I felt when I was younger, wrestling with the shadows that lingered in the corners of my mind. I nodded, though I didn't know what I would find. I turned to leave, but just before stepping out, I felt an urge to look around one last time. The living room, with its worn furniture and family pictures, felt heavy with memories. I caught a glimpse of a framed photo on the wall, a smiling family gathering that seemed out of place amid the tension. There was something in the dad's eyes, a flicker that seemed to look right back at me. As I walked outside, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was caught in a web woven with grief and longing. I got in my car, but instead of driving away, I sat there, staring at the house. Something wasn't right, and I needed to uncover the truth. The question lingered, what really happened in this home? The next day, I returned to the house, compelled by a mix of curiosity and unease. The sun had crested the horizon, casting a golden light across the front yard. It felt like a peaceful morning, yet I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I approached the front door again, taking a deep breath before knocking. The daughter opened up, her expression a blend of relief and apprehension. "Did you find anything?" she asked, glancing over her shoulder as if expecting someone to appear behind her. I shook my head, trying to keep my tone steady. "Not yet. I think we need to talk to your mom again. She might know more than she realizes." I watched her nod, determination flickering in her eyes, and I felt a sense of shared purpose. "Okay, I'll go get her," she said before disappearing into the house. I stood on the porch, absorbing the surroundings. The quiet neighborhood seemed almost idyllic, a stark contrast to the growing tension I felt inside. Moments later, she returned with her mother, a frail woman whose eyes bore the weight of untold stories. "Why are you here?" she asked, her voice thin and fragile. "What do you want?" There was an edge to her tone, a mix of fear and mistrust that resonated with me. "I just want to help," I said, trying to convey sincerity. "Your daughter mentioned some strange noises, and I think there's something behind it." Her expression shifted, and for a moment I saw a flicker of vulnerability. "I've heard things," she admitted, her gaze drifting to the floor. "Things that shouldn't be there." My heart raced. I was finally getting somewhere. "Can you describe what you've experienced?" I pressed gently, hoping to draw out her fears. "Footsteps, whispers, shadows," she started, her voice wavering. "It feels like someone is watching me." I nodded, urging her to continue. "Sometimes it feels as if he's still here, like he never left." The mention of he sent a chill down my spine. Who was she talking about? I needed to know. As she spoke, the air shifted. I felt a cold draft sweep through the room, raising the hair on my arms. The daughter glanced nervously at me, and I could see her anxiety mounting. "Mom, maybe we should stop," she suggested softly, but I sensed a deeper issue. "No, it's important. Please, keep going," I encouraged. "There was a fire years ago," the mother continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "I thought it was just an accident, but sometimes I wonder if it was something more." That revelation hung in the air, thick with implications. I leaned closer, drawn in by the haunting quality of her words. "Do you think it was arson?" I asked, my mind racing with possibilities. She shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. "I don't know, but I remember the night so clearly. The flames, the screams." The daughter gripped her mother's hand, and I felt the gravity of their shared fear. I needed to see more. "Can I look around the house?" I asked, gauging their reactions. The mother exchanged a glance with her daughter before nodding hesitantly. "Be careful," she warned. "He doesn't like it when people intrude." Those words sent a shiver down my spine. What had I stepped into? As I moved through the house, I felt the atmosphere shift again. Each room told a story, and the echoes of the past whispered secrets I wasn't ready to uncover. I paused in front of a closed door at the end of the hallway. "What's in there?" I asked, pointing. The daughter hesitated. That's Mom's old study. She hasn't been in there since." With a mixture of curiosity and dread, I turned the knob and pushed the door open. The room was dim, filled with dust and shadows, and in the corner, I spotted a small blackened patch on the floor. My heart sank as I realized it was charred wood, remnants of something that had burned away long ago. Suddenly, I understood. The fire hadn't just been a tragic event. It was a beginning of something dark and relentless. It was just past 2 in the morning when the alarm jolted me awake. I glanced at the clock, my heart racing as I slipped into my uniform. A house fire. I could hardly believe it. We respond to tons of false alarms, smoke detectors malfunctioning, or someone burning their dinner. It's usually a simple call. But there was something about this one that felt different from the start. As I arrived at the station, the familiar sounds of the sirens pierced the quiet night. The crew moved quickly, their faces a mix of focus and determination. "First engine dispatched," I announced, my voice steady despite the unease stirring in my gut. We piled into the truck, adrenaline coursing through our veins. "What do you think it is?" one of the guys asked. "Probably just a faulty detector," I replied, but deep down, I felt a nagging worry that I couldn't shake. Driving through the darkened streets, I could see the flicker of orange lights in the distance. My instincts kicked in. I scanned the area, assessing the situation before we even arrived. The glow grew stronger, illuminating the houses around us. As we pulled closer, the reality of the scene unfolded. A massive 2-story house was engulfed in flames, bright and consuming. I could feel the heat radiating even from the truck. "Get ready! We're on scene!" I shouted, trying to rally the team as we jumped out of the truck. My heart pounded, but I remained composed. It's what we train for. I took a moment to breathe, absorbing the chaos. Firefighters rushed to their positions, hoses in hand, while others set up lights to illuminate the scene. My eyes narrowed at the raging fire. This was no ordinary call. Once I assumed command, the rhythm of the night shifted. "Get a line to the rear. We need to cut off that fire," I directed, my voice cutting through the night. We communicated over the radio, the familiar jargon spilling out as I coordinated the attack. Watching my team, I felt a surge of pride. These were seasoned professionals, each of them trained to handle any situation. But as the fire crackled and roared, an unsettling feeling settled over me. After some time, we began to gain the upper hand. The flames retreated, giving us a glimmer of hope. We might have it under control, I thought, but just as I felt the tension ease, a wisp of smoke curled out from a second-floor window. "There's still something burning up there," I muttered, glancing up. "Check the BC corner. There might be a hidden spot." I relayed the instructions to the crew inside. The radio crackled to life. "Cap, there's nothing here. No room." Confusion flickered in my mind. I could see the window clearly, but why couldn't they find the space? "Can you confirm the layout? I'm looking right at it," I insisted. They repeated the same response, their voices tinged with uncertainty. I felt a twist in my stomach. This wasn't adding up. "Let me in there," I requested, feeling the urgency rise. My feet were already moving before I heard the commander's acknowledgement. I needed to show them where to look. The smoke billowed around me as I climbed the stairs, my heart pounding. The hallway stretched before me, unfamiliar and dark, but I pressed forward, determined to find the room that eluded my team. Stepping into the hallway, a chill ran down my spine. There was no door, no room, just a wall. "What the hell?" I whispered to myself, shaking my head in disbelief. I could hear my heart beating louder in my ears. There had to be something behind that wall. I called for the crew to follow, but doubt lingered in the air. Something was off, and I could feel it deep in my bones. Before I knew it, we were breaking through the drywall, our tools clanging against the surface. The dust clouded around us, but we pushed through. I held my breath, waiting for the reveal. And then it happened. As the wall crumbled, a small room emerged, untouched and locked away. A child's room, just as I'd feared. Perfectly preserved, as if time had forgotten it. I felt a chill wash over me. Why had they hidden this room, and what secrets lay within? As the dust settled, I stepped into the room. The sight struck me. Walls painted a soft blue, a small bed tucked neatly in one corner, and shelves lined with toys that looked as if they hadn't been touched in years. It was too perfect, too preserved. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was intruding on something sacred, something long forgotten. My heart raced, and I felt a strange mix of curiosity and dread. "What the hell is this place?" I whispered, more to myself than anyone else. My mind raced with questions. Why was there a child's room hidden behind a wall in a house that was clearly abandoned? A teammate called out, breaking the trance. "Cap, are you okay?" Their concern was evident, but I struggled to find words. The air felt heavy, almost electric, as if the room held a secret just out of reach. I crouched down, inspecting the toys. A teddy bear, a dusty puzzle, and a little wooden train sat on the shelf. All of it seemed eerily untouched. I picked up the bear, feeling its worn fur against my skin. It was like holding a memory that had been trapped here for too long. "What happened to the child?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. A shiver ran through me as I pondered the dark possibilities. The crew joined me, their faces a mix of confusion and unease. "We need to check for survivors," I said, shaking off the creeping feeling that something was terribly wrong. There might be someone else in the house. I turned to lead the way back through the hole we'd created, but my gut twisted with the thought of what we might find. The fire had been intense, but who knew what other horrors lingered in this place? As we searched the house, I couldn't shake the image of that child's room from my mind. Each door we opened revealed only charred remains and smoke-stained walls. "It's all gone," one of the guys muttered, glancing back at me. I nodded, still focused on the task at hand, but my thoughts lingered on the hidden room. How could something so innocent exist in a place filled with destruction? We reached the second floor, where the smoke was thick and visibility was low. "We've got to clear this out," I shouted, trying to rally the team. "There's got to be a reason that room is there." I felt a sense of urgency push me forward. The further we moved, the more I felt an unseen presence. It was as if the house was alive, watching us with eyes that couldn't be seen. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from below. I spun around, adrenaline surging. "What was that?" I demanded, my heart pounding. The crew exchanged nervous glances. "Let's check it out," I commanded, leading the way back down the staircase. As we descended, I could feel something shifting in the atmosphere, a tension that coiled tighter with each step. When we reached the living room, my breath caught in my throat. The floor was littered with debris from the fire, but something else caught my eye. An old diary, partially burned but still intact. "This might tell us what happened here," I said, my fingers trembling as I reached for it. As I opened the cover, the musty scent of aged paper filled the air, blending with the smoke. "What does it say?" one of my colleagues asked, peering over my shoulder. I began to read, my voice shaky as I deciphered the words. "It's about a little girl, Lily. She used to play in that room. There's something about a dark figure that watched her from the window." I paused, a chill running down my spine. The room wasn't just a hiding place, it was a prison of memories, and perhaps of fears that refused to die. Just then, a loud bang echoed from the second floor, jolting us from our thoughts. "We need to get out," someone shouted, fear evident in their voice. But I hesitated. The room, Lily's room, lingered in my mind. What if there's more to find? I wondered, torn between duty and an inexplicable need to uncover the truth. The flames were still threatening, but the pull of that hidden past was stronger. I looked at my team, faces pale and wide-eyed, and realized I needed to make a choice. "We can't leave without understanding this place," I said firmly, my voice steady despite the chaos surrounding us. "Let's go back and see what we can find." As I turned to lead the way back up, the feeling of being watched intensified. It was as if the house was aware of our presence, waiting to reveal its final secrets. Climbing back up the staircase felt different. Each step seemed to resonate with a deep echo, as if the house itself was holding its breath. My team followed closely, their faces drawn tight with concern and fear. I couldn't help but glance back at them. "Are we really doing this?" I asked, trying to gauge their resolve. One of the guys, Tom, nodded slowly. "We have to find out what happened here, Cap. We can't just leave it." I appreciated his courage, but doubt nagged at me like a persistent itch. We reached the second floor, and the heat from the remnants of the fire wrapped around us. I had a flashlight, its beam cutting through the darkness like a knife. The shadows danced along the walls, creating shapes that played tricks on my mind. "Stay alert," I instructed, the weight of responsibility heavy on my shoulders. We might not be alone. The memory of Lily's room lingered, fueling my determination to uncover whatever lay hidden in this house. As we moved cautiously down the hall, the sounds of our footsteps felt amplified. Each creak of the floorboards echoed in my ears. "What do you think is up here?" another teammate, Lisa, asked, her voice shaky. "I'm not sure," I admitted, "but I have a feeling it's something we need to confront." I didn't want to scare them, but my gut told me the truth was lurking just beyond our reach. Finally, we approached the door to Lily's room. The heavy air around us thickened, as if time itself paused for a moment. I hesitated, placing my hand on the doorknob. "You ready?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. The team nodded, a mix of trepidation and resolve in their eyes. I twisted the knob, and the door creaked open, revealing the room in its haunting stillness. Dust motes floated in the beam of my flashlight, and I stepped inside, my heart racing. As I surveyed the space, I noticed a corner of the room that seemed out of place. A small trunk sat there, covered in dust, but otherwise untouched. "What's this?" I wondered aloud. Lisa moved closer, her curiosity piqued. "Should we open it?" she asked. My gut told me that trunk could hold answers or something much darker. I nodded, but a part of me hesitated. With a deep breath, I knelt down and lifted the lid. The hinges creaked ominously as it opened, revealing a jumble of old clothes and faded photographs. I rifled through the contents, my hands trembling. "These must belong to Lily," I said, holding up a small dress, its fabric worn and soft. As I inspected the photos, I felt a connection to the little girl. There she was, laughing in the sun, her eyes sparkling with joy. But behind the smiles, shadows lurked, just like in the house. "Wait," Tom said suddenly, pointing to one of the photographs. "Look at that!" I squinted at the image, seeing a dark figure lurking in the background. The air grew tense as we exchanged uneasy glances. "What do you think it is?" Lisa whispered. "I don't know," I replied, a knot forming in my stomach. "But it feels wrong. We need to keep moving." The revelation weighed heavily on me, but I couldn't let it consume us. Just as we began to close the trunk, a sudden crash echoed from downstairs, shaking the walls. "What was that?" I shouted, adrenaline surging. We bolted to the door, instincts kicking in. "Let's check it out," I ordered, leading the charge back down. My heart raced, not just from fear, but from a growing sense that we were being drawn deeper into a web of secrets. As we descended the staircase, I felt the house pulse around us, alive with a dark energy that both terrified and fascinated me. When we reached the bottom, the living room was in chaos. A beam had fallen, scattering debris everywhere. I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever force was at play didn't want us here. "This is bad," I said, trying to assess the situation. But as I turned to rally the team, something caught my eye. In the corner, a shadow moved, quick, deliberate. My breath caught in my throat. "Did you see that?" I asked, my voice low. "Yeah, I did," Tom replied, stepping closer. "But what was it?" I was about to respond when the light flickered, plunging us into darkness for a heartbeat. I fumbled for the flashlight, my pulse quickening. Just as I turned it back on, the shadow was gone. The house felt different now, charged with an energy that threatened to swallow us whole. "We have to leave," I said, the urgency in my voice apparent, but my mind raced with questions. What was that figure? And what did it mean for Lily and for us? "Let's go," I shouted, adrenaline surging through my veins as we rushed toward the exit. The urgency in my voice pushed everyone forward. The fallen beam lay like a warning, a message that we were trespassing on ground that held secrets best left undisturbed. My heart pounded with every step, the fear of what might be lurking in the shadows pushing us faster. "We need to stick together," I reminded the group. I felt responsible for their safety, and the weight of that responsibility pressed down on me. As we reached the front door, I paused for a moment, glancing back at the chaos we were leaving behind. A part of me wanted to turn back, to confront whatever had stirred in the darkness. "We can't just abandon Lily's story," I murmured, thinking of the little girl whose laughter had once filled this home. She deserves to be remembered. But the darkness felt more oppressive now, almost alive, and it beckoned to us with a chilling allure. "Cap, we need to move," Lisa urged, her voice trembling. Just as I reached for the doorknob, a sudden crash echoed from above. My body froze. "What was that?" Tom asked, fear lining his features. I turned, my instincts screaming that we were not alone. "Maybe it's just the wind," I suggested, though my voice lacked conviction. But deep down, I knew that whatever was causing the noises was far from natural. The atmosphere crackled with a sense of impending doom. We hesitated, torn between the instinct to escape and the need to uncover the truth. "Let's check the stairs again," I finally decided, feeling a surge of determination. There could be something up there we missed. The others exchanged glances, fear mingling with curiosity. I led the way, climbing back up, each step echoing the uncertainty we all felt. The house creaked around us, its very bones shifting and groaning as if trying to warn us off. When we reached the landing, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. The air felt thick with anticipation, and my skin prickled. "Stay close," I whispered, scanning the hallway. Just then I caught a glimpse of that shadow again, flickering at the end of the corridor. "Did you see it?" I breathed, my voice barely above a whisper. "There's something here." Tom nodded, his expression grim. "We can't just ignore it." As we approached the door to Lily's room once more, my heart raced. "We need to figure out what this is," I said, my resolve hardening. I took a deep breath and pushed the door open. The room stood still, yet something felt off. The trunk remained untouched, but an oppressive weight hung in the air. I looked back at my team, gauging their readiness. "Let's check the trunk again," I proposed, my curiosity overwhelming my fear. As I opened the trunk, my fingers brushed against the fabric of the dress again, but this time it felt colder, almost unnatural. "What's going on?" Lisa asked, her brow furrowed in concern. "It's like it's alive," I replied, feeling a chill run down my spine. I rifled through the contents, searching for anything that might shed light on what we were experiencing. That's when I found a small diary hidden beneath the clothes. Flipping it open, I saw Lily's handwriting scrawled across the pages. "This is it," I whispered, sharing the moment with my team. "Maybe she left us clues." My heart raced as I read the entries. her innocent words capturing the joy and innocence of childhood. But then the tone shifted, the writing becoming erratic. "Something's coming," she wrote, "and I can't keep it away." My breath hitched as the implications sank in. "What does that mean?" Tom asked, his voice filled with concern. "It means we're not just here to investigate a story," I replied, a knot tightening in my stomach. "We're in the middle of something much darker." Just as I closed the diary, the lights flickered again, plunging us into darkness. Panic surged through me, and I grabbed for my flashlight, my hands trembling. The fear of the unknown gripped us all, a shared understanding that we were crossing a line we might never return from. In that moment of darkness, I felt a presence behind me, heavy and looming. "Turn the light back on," Lisa cried out. I swung the flashlight around, illuminating the hallway, but it felt like a futile gesture. The shadows danced mockingly, and I could swear I heard whispers in the air, taunting us, reminding us of our trespass. "We need to get out of here," I shouted, urgency spilling into my words. But as we turned to leave, the shadow moved again, blocking our exit, leaving us trapped in the heart of our worst fears. Panic surged within me as that shadow loomed closer, blocking our escape route. "What do we do now?" Lisa whispered, her voice trembling. The fear in her eyes mirrored my own. "We can't just stand here," I replied, trying to keep my tone steady. "We need to find another way out." The urgency in my words felt inadequate against the overwhelming presence that surrounded us. I glanced at Tom, hoping for some sign of courage from him, but his face was ashen, reflecting the dread gripping us all. "Maybe we can get to the attic," Tom suggested, desperation creeping into his voice. "It's higher ground. We might find another exit." I nodded, a flicker of hope igniting inside me. "Let's go," I urged, moving quickly down the hallway, leaving the room behind. My heart raced with every step, and the air felt charged as if the house itself was alive, watching our every move. I could almost hear the floorboards creaking beneath the weight of our fears. As we climbed the stairs to the attic, I felt an unsettling mixture of anticipation and dread. The closer we got, the more I sensed that whatever was haunting this place didn't want us to leave. "Keep your eyes peeled," I warned. "We don't know what we'll find up there." With each step, the shadows seemed to thicken, wrapping around us like a fog. "I can't shake this feeling that we're being hunted," Lisa admitted, and her words sent a chill through me. Finally, we reached the attic door. I hesitated, my hand resting on the knob. "If we go in, we have to be ready for anything," I said, glancing back at my friends. They nodded, steeling themselves for the unknown. As I turned the handle and pushed the door open, a wave of musty air hit us, filled with dust and memories long forgotten. The attic was cluttered with old furniture, boxes, and cobwebs that seemed to cling to the walls like reluctant ghosts. "Look at this," I said, pointing to an old trunk in the corner, its leather cracked and faded. "There might be something useful inside." I stepped forward, my heart pounding, but as I approached, I felt a sharp gust of wind, even though the windows were shut tight. "What was that?" Tom asked, his eyes darting around the room. I shrugged, trying to dismiss the unease creeping in again. "Probably just the house settling," I replied, though I didn't believe it. I knelt by the trunk, fumbling with the latch. "Help me with this," I called to Tom. He came over, and together we pried it open. Inside lay an assortment of items, old clothes, faded photographs, and a diary. "Let's see what secrets are hiding in here," I said, lifting the diary. It felt heavier than I expected, as if it carried the weight of the stories within. As I flipped through the pages, I discovered it belonged to Lily, filled with her innocent thoughts and dreams. But as I read further, the entries darkened, reflecting a shift in her spirit. "Something bad is coming," one entry read. "I can't tell anyone." My throat tightened as I shared the words with my friends. This isn't just a story. This is a warning. The atmosphere shifted again, an invisible pressure enveloping us. Just then, the attic door slammed shut, plunging us into darkness. "What the hell?" Tom shouted, panic setting in. "We're trapped." I pounded on the door, but it wouldn't budge. "Stay calm," I urged, though I could feel my own heart racing. The shadows in the corners of the attic began to shift and swirl, forming shapes that felt all too real. "We need to find another way out," I said, my voice shaky but determined. I turned back to the trunk, searching for anything that could help us escape. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from below. "What was that?" Lisa cried, eyes wide with fear. "Something's coming," I yelled, urgency spilling from my words. I grabbed the diary and shoved it into my backpack, my instincts screaming that we needed to go now. "Follow me," I shouted, darting toward the only window in the attic. I could feel the weight of Lily's words pressing down on us. The house had a dark secret, and we were caught in its grasp. As I reached the window and tried to pry it open, the shadows swirled closer. "Hurry," Tom urged, and with one final push, the window gave way. I climbed through, the cool night air hitting my face like a breath of fresh hope. But as I turned to help my friends, I saw them frozen, staring into the darkness behind me. "What's wrong?" I asked, fear rising again. Their expressions told me everything. "It's here," Lisa whispered. "It's finally here." The realization sank in like a stone in my gut. We were no longer just chasing a story. We had awakened something that would not let us leave. I've been a police officer for 15 years, and I can tell you, nothing prepared me for that night. The radio crackled to life with the usual chatter, but then came a call that piqued my interest. An elderly woman was on the line, her voice shaky and filled with urgency. "I see someone out back," she said, her words tumbling over each other. "Please, I need help. I think they're watching me." I felt a shiver run down my spine. It wasn't uncommon for people to panic, but something in her tone told me this was serious. As I drove through the quiet streets toward her home, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The neighborhood was peaceful, the kind where you could leave your doors unlocked and feel safe. I recalled an article I'd read about how crime rates dropped in communities where neighbors looked out for each other. But here I was, headed to what might be a dangerous situation. Was this a simple case of an old lady's imagination running wild, or was there really a threat lurking in the shadows? Pulling up in front of her house, I noticed the porch light flickering. The front door stood ajar, swinging gently in the breeze. I shared a glance with my partner, who shrugged, a look of skepticism on his face. I stepped inside, flashlight cutting through the darkness. The air felt thick, charged with an unsettling energy. "Ma'am?" I called out, my voice echoing slightly. "Are you here?" I found her sitting in the living room, her frail figure hunched over in a chair. She stared intently out the window, almost as if in a trance. "I saw it," she muttered, her eyes wide. "It was right there." I followed her gaze, scanning the yard beyond the glass. The shadows danced under the moonlight, but nothing seemed out of place. The tall fences around her property loomed like sentinels, impossible for anyone to breach without being seen. "Can you tell me what you saw?" I asked gently, kneeling beside her. Her eyes flicked back to me, fear washing over her face. A tall figure, dark. "It was waiting," she said, her voice trembling. I tried to reassure her, reminding myself that sometimes the mind plays tricks, especially in the solitude of night. I shared stories of other calls I had taken, where shadows and darkness could easily be mistaken for something more sinister. While my partner checked the backyard, I pulled out my flashlight and inspected the living room. There were no signs of forced entry. Nothing seemed out of order. But as I walked toward the back of the house, something caught my eye. A thin layer of dust on the floor, except for a set of footprints leading toward the kitchen. My heart raced. The woman's claims, once dismissed, began to weigh heavily on my mind. Had someone really been inside? "Hey!" I called to my partner, who was now outside looking around the yard. "You better come take a look at this." When he joined me, I pointed out the tracks. "These lead right toward her kitchen." A frown crossed his face as he followed the trail. "It's strange," he muttered. "The door was unlocked. She could have left it that way." "Maybe," I replied, glancing back at the woman. She still stared out the window, a look of deep concentration etched on her features. "But she called us for a reason." I felt a chill creep in, a sense that something more than mere imagination was at play. As I contemplated our next move, I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was lurking out there wasn't gone just yet. Just then, a movement caught my attention, a flicker of motion in the corner of the window. I turned sharply, but there was nothing there. "Did you see that?" I asked my partner, his brow furrowing. He shook his head, but the unease in his eyes mirrored my own. Whatever was happening felt wrong. I couldn't help but wonder if we were too late. In that moment, I realized this wasn't just about shadows in the dark. This was about fear, vulnerability, and the things we can't always see. I took a deep breath, knowing that we had to dig deeper. The night had only just begun, and there was more to uncover. As I stood there, the air heavy with uncertainty, I prepared myself for whatever revelations lay ahead. As we stood in that dimly lit kitchen, I couldn't shake the sense that we were missing something crucial. I pointed out the footprints again, tracing them with my flashlight. "Look here," I said to my partner, who squatted down to get a closer look. The impressions were small, almost delicate, like a child's. "How did someone get in without her noticing?" he wondered aloud, scratching his head. It was a valid question. The woman had claimed she saw a figure outside, but maybe she hadn't been looking out at all. I felt a tightness in my chest, the kind that happens when you're on the verge of realizing something significant. "Let's check the rest of the house," I suggested, moving deeper into the darkened corners. As we explored, I recalled another case, a missing person who had vanished from her home without a trace. Everyone had assumed she'd left on her own, but we later discovered she had been living with an intruder for weeks. I couldn't help but feel we might be on the brink of uncovering something similar here. We moved to the hallway, where the old floorboards creaked underfoot. "Ma'am, is there anyone else in the house?" I called, trying to keep my voice steady. "Anyone you know who might be visiting?" Her gaze remained fixed on the window, the shadows outside shifting with the breeze. "No one," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I live alone. I've always lived alone." There was a weight to her words, a history steeped in solitude. My partner and I exchanged a glance, his brow furrowed in concern. The woman's loneliness seemed palpable, wrapping around her like a heavy blanket. I couldn't help but think about how isolation can affect our minds. In my years on the force, I'd encountered many who had experienced similar feelings, often leading to paranoia and fear. Yet, something in her demeanor told me this wasn't just paranoia. There was something deeper lurking in the shadows. As we proceeded toward the bedrooms, I couldn't shake the sensation of being watched. Every creak of the house felt like a whisper, every shadow like a threat. My instincts kicked in. I pulled out my phone, flicking on the camera to capture any signs of intrusion. "Let's document everything," I said, trying to keep the atmosphere professional despite the chill creeping in. "We need to ensure nothing gets overlooked." My partner nodded, focused on the task at hand, but I sensed his own unease. I knocked softly on the first bedroom door, then slowly pushed it open. The room was unremarkable, yet my heart raced. There was something off about the way the light fell across the bed, casting odd shadows against the wall. "Check the closet," I said, and my partner obliged, throwing open the doors. The emptiness inside made me uneasy. "Nothing here," he reported, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Next, we approached the bathroom. It was small and tidy, but as I glanced around, I noticed the window was slightly ajar. "Could someone have come in this way?" I mused aloud. "This is the only window that doesn't have bars." My partner stepped closer to examine it. If someone had climbed through, they'd have left marks. Just as he said that, I noticed something on the sink, a small, crumpled piece of paper. "Wait," I said, picking it up. It was a note, hastily scrawled and almost illegible. "I see you." My heart dropped as I read those words. "What does this mean?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. My partner looked over my shoulder, and his eyes widened. "We need to tell her," he said, the gravity of the situation sinking in. But just as we turned to leave the bathroom, I felt a sudden chill. I turned around, scanning the room once more. "Did you hear that?" I asked. My partner shook his head, his expression one of confusion. Yet I was certain I had heard a soft sound, something like a sigh or a murmur, drifting through the air. It was fleeting, yet it filled me with a sense of dread. What if someone was still in the house? As we stepped back into the hallway, a chilling thought crossed my mind. What if the figure she had seen was not lurking outside, but hidden within these very walls? The realization sent shivers down my spine. We needed to find the truth, not just for her safety, but for our own. There was something deeply unsettling about this case that felt far from over. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come, knowing that the answers lay just beyond the next corner. As I stood there, the weight of the note in my hand felt heavier than it should have. I see you. Those words echoed in my mind, each syllable sending a jolt through my senses. I glanced at my partner, whose face had gone pale. "What do we do now?" I asked, my voice low, almost fearful. He shook his head, clearly as unnerved as I was. "We have to confront her. She needs to know." We returned to the living room, where the woman remained by the window, her silhouette barely illuminated by the fading light. I could see the worry etched on her face. "Ma'am," I began, trying to keep my tone calm, "we found something in the bathroom." Her eyes darted to mine, then back to the floor. "What is it?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "A note," I replied, holding it up for her to see. "It says, 'I see you.'" Her expression shifted. "I've felt it," she said, her words trembling. "Something's been watching me. I thought it was just my mind playing tricks, but—" She paused, her gaze drifting back to the darkening window. "I've heard noises at night. Footsteps. Sometimes I think I see someone out there." There was a truth in her voice, a raw edge that suggested she had been holding on to this fear for far too long. "Can you tell us more about those nights?" I pressed, needing details. "What exactly did you hear?" She took a deep breath. "It starts with scratching, like nails on wood. Then, whispers. Sometimes I can't make out the words, but they're there." I felt a chill run down my spine. I remembered a similar case where a woman had been terrorized by an intruder who communicated with her through strange sounds, creating a sense of dread that consumed her life. As she spoke, I felt a flicker of connection. I could understand her fear, the way it gnawed at the edges of her sanity. "I know this sounds strange, but have you thought about whether someone could be living in your home?" I asked carefully. Her eyes widened, and she shook her head violently. "No, it's just me. I would know." "Sometimes we don't see what's right in front of us," my partner added, attempting to keep the conversation grounded. "We can help you figure this out." I hoped our words would offer some comfort, but I could tell she was grappling with disbelief. She looked at me, and I could see the fight in her eyes, a mix of terror and stubbornness. "I can't let myself think that," she replied, her voice hardening. "I've always been alone, and I prefer it that way." A part of me understood that desire for solitude. The world can be overwhelming, and the safety of isolation often feels like a sanctuary. But her situation was different. She was no longer alone. The threats had crept in, unseen, undetected. I decided it was time to investigate further. "Let's check the rest of the house, every nook and cranny," I suggested, trying to sound decisive. My partner nodded in agreement. We needed to explore every inch and determine if someone had indeed made this place their hiding spot. "If there's someone here, we need to find them," I urged, trying to keep the tension from spilling into panic. As we moved toward the basement door, I could feel my heart racing. The air shifted, thick with uncertainty. I turned to her. "Have you been down there recently?" I asked. She hesitated. "Not in a long time. It's too dark and damp. I hate it down there." That seemed like an answer too perfect to overlook. "Let's check it out," I insisted, opening the door and flicking on the light. The stairs creaked under our weight as we descended. The faint light revealed cobwebs and dust, untouched by time. "Stay close," I said, feeling a surge of protectiveness. The basement felt like another world, and every step echoed with a sense of foreboding. As we reached the bottom, I scanned the space for anything out of the ordinary. Then I noticed something in the far corner, an old trunk, covered in dust and shadows. "What's this?" I asked, moving closer. My partner joined me, the air thickening around us. The trunk was locked, but a sense of dread washed over me. What could be inside? I muttered, my heart pounding. Whatever lay ahead, I knew it was the key to unraveling the mystery of the woman's haunting presence. As I knelt beside the trunk, a shiver ran through me, not from fear, but from anticipation. The lock looked old, rusted, yet it had a peculiar allure, like it held secrets begging to be uncovered. "Do you have any idea what this could be?" I asked, glancing at the woman. She shook her head, her brow furrowed, uncertainty etched across her features. "No, I've never seen it before." My partner stood close, his posture tense, as if he could feel the weight of what was about to unfold. "Let's see if we can open it," I suggested, scanning the area for something to pry it open. My mind raced with possibilities. What if this trunk contained clues to the presence haunting her? Or worse, What if it held something far more sinister? My partner rummaged through a pile of old tools in the corner, finally producing a rusty screwdriver. "This should do," he said, handing it to me. As I worked on the lock, I could hear the woman's breathing quicken. "I really don't like this," she muttered, glancing nervously around the basement. "What if there's something dangerous inside?" I paused for a moment, considering her words. "Sometimes, facing our fears is the only way to move forward," I replied, though I wasn't entirely convinced myself. Finally, the lock gave way with a loud click. The lid creaked open, revealing a dark interior. I felt the urge to look away, but curiosity held me captive. Inside lay a collection of items: old clothes, tarnished jewelry, and a stack of faded photographs. I reached in and picked up one of the pictures. A young woman smiled back at me, her eyes glinting with a mix of joy and something unnameable. "Who is this?" I asked, showing it to my partner. "I don't know," the woman replied, leaning closer. "I've never seen her before." A flicker of recognition crossed her face, though. I sensed she was hiding something. "Are you sure? Look at her expression. It feels familiar, doesn't it?" My partner's brow furrowed in thought, but the woman stepped back, shaking her head. "I don't want to dig into the past," she said, her voice rising slightly. "We need to understand what this is," I insisted, a hint of frustration creeping into my tone. "This trunk might be a connection to whatever's happening to you." The tension hung thick between us. I could see her wrestling with her emotions, caught between the desire for answers and the fear of what those answers might reveal. As I continued to sift through the trunk, I found an old diary buried beneath the clothes. The cover was worn, the pages yellowed, but it felt significant. "This could give us some insight," I said, flipping it open. The first few pages were filled with neat handwriting, detailing everyday life. Names, places, and small anecdotes spilled from the pages, revealing glimpses into a life long gone. But as I read further, the tone shifted. Entries began to speak of feelings of being watched, of strange occurrences. "It's happening again," one entry said. "I can feel her presence everywhere." I looked up at the woman, whose eyes were wide with shock. "What does this mean?" she whispered, as if afraid to hear the answer. "It means you're not alone in this," I replied, my voice steady but filled with concern. Someone else experienced this before. We had stumbled upon something crucial, a thread that could unravel the mystery. But the deeper we went, the more I felt a tightening knot in my gut. "Do you think this is connected to what you've been feeling?" I asked. She nodded slowly, processing the information. "It has to be. This is my home, and I need to know why I'm being haunted." As I flipped through more pages, the entries grew darker. "I hear whispers at night," one read. "They call my name." The atmosphere in the basement shifted, an unspoken weight settling over us. The room felt smaller, the shadows deeper. "Do you ever hear your name?" I asked, searching her eyes for answers. She hesitated, the memory of the note flashing through my mind. "Sometimes," she admitted softly, "but I always thought it was just my imagination." "Imagination or not, we can't ignore it any longer," I said, my resolve strengthening. We needed to delve deeper, to confront whatever lingered in the corners of this house. There was more to uncover, more to face, and as I stared at the diary, I realized we were only beginning to scratch the surface. What awaited us next was uncertain, but it was clear that the path ahead was shrouded in shadows, ready to unveil secrets that could change everything. As I flipped through the diary, the entries grew more frantic, the handwriting increasingly erratic. "I can't escape her. She's everywhere." I paused, staring at the words. What had this woman gone through? "You need to read this," I said, my voice trembling slightly. My partner leaned in closer, her expression shifting from confusion to horror as she absorbed the implications. "What if it's true?" she whispered, the weight of the moment settling in. "I don't know," I replied, setting the diary aside for a moment, "but we have to find out." I could sense the tension building between us, like the air before a storm. I needed to keep her focused. "Look, we've come this far. We can't turn back now. Let's go through the rest of this trunk." As we sifted through the remaining contents, I uncovered a collection of letters, each one more disturbing than the last. They spoke of voices in the night, of feelings of dread creeping into every corner of her home. I glanced up at her, noticing the way her hands trembled as she held a small trinket. A locket, tarnished and old, Do you recognize this? I asked, watching her face for any sign of familiarity. No, she replied, her voice barely a whisper. But it feels important. I took it from her, opening the locket to find a tiny photograph of a child. Do you think this was hers? I pressed, hoping for a clue. I have no idea, she admitted, her brow furrowing in thought, but it makes me feel uneasy. This is a piece of the puzzle, I said, determination flooding through me. I couldn't shake the feeling that the locket was more than just a trinket. It was a connection to the past, a link that could lead us deeper into the mystery. We need to find out who this child was. The atmosphere in the basement grew thick with uncertainty as we ventured into uncharted territory. What do you think happened to her? My partner asked, her voice shaky. I paused, considering the dark possibilities. Sometimes, those who suffer linger on, I replied, the weight of my own words settling over me. We need to tread carefully. As we continued searching, I felt a sudden chill sweep through the room, freezing me in place. I glanced at my partner, who looked equally startled. Did you feel that? She asked, eyes wide. I nodded, my heart racing. It's like the air shifted. Maybe it's a sign we're on the right track, she suggested, trying to shake off the tension. But as I looked around, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. The basement, once just a space filled with dust and old memories, now felt like a living entity, holding its breath as if waiting for something to happen. And then I noticed something out of the corner of my eye, an old photo on the wall, partially obscured by shadow. I approached it cautiously, my pulse quickening. As I pulled it free, the image took my breath away. It was a photograph of the same woman from the diary, but she was holding the child from the locket. My heart raced. This is her, I said, showing the picture to my partner. This was the woman in the diary. What does this mean? She asked, her voice trembling. Are we supposed to be afraid? I shook my head. I don't know yet, but we're getting closer to understanding. Suddenly, the lights flickered, casting eerie shadows across the walls. Let's get out of here, she urged, her fear palpable. But as we turned to leave, I felt a weight in the air, a force pulling me back. Wait, I said, my voice low. We can't leave now, not after coming this far. Just then, a sound echoed through the basement, a distinct voice, clear as day, calling my name. I froze, the realization hitting me hard. It's her, I breathed, looking around frantically. She wants us to find her. The darkness around us deepened, swallowing the light. Before I could process what was happening, the room shifted. The shelves creaked, and items began to tumble. We need to go, now, my partner screamed, grabbing my arm. But as I turned to leave, I saw something in the corner of my eye, a shadowy figure, watching us, a twisted smile forming on its lips. In that moment, I knew we had crossed a line. We had awakened something that should have remained buried. The tension surged, and as we stumbled toward the stairs, a chilling realization settled in. Whatever was trapped in this house had no intention of letting us escape. The fear I felt morphed into something darker, something that would haunt me long after we left that place behind. What had we really uncovered? The answer remained just out of reach, lingering like a phantom at the edge of my consciousness, waiting to reveal itself in a way I never expected.